See how fun it is?
Mm.
Yeah, this is an important one too. Then I'm loving all of these. Yeah.
Mm.
All
Wonderful.
right, it's my cat. Da-da-da. Hi everyone, and welcome back. This is our part 2 with Vicki Tapia, who is just an amazing woman. She's the author of "Someone Stole My Iron." It's I want to get it right. It's a family memoir of dementia. You know what? I had it right, so I should have just gone with it. A family memoir of dementia. And both of her parents were diagnosed with dementia, different forms of dementia, just within like months of each other. And she found herself as a caregiver over time and learning to care with two different personalities, very different personalities, and different forms of dementia as well. And so, welcome, Vicki.
Thank you, Carmen. Glad to.
Yeah, our conversation for part 1 is so great. We need to do a part 2. As we talked about in part 1, the various signs that there's a problem, and also the problems that get in our way as we try to make sense of it, right? How we rationalize what's happening, which is just normal. And I think pretty much everybody, I've even known people who are dementia specialists that don't catch it in their own loved ones for a variety of reasons, which we talked about in part 1. So be sure you listen to part 1 too. Yeah. And I kind of want to pick up now then. And, once your parents were diagnosed and then there's some time in there and they moved closer to where you were. And as they approached then toward the latter part of their lives, and what was that like for both daughter and in that role of the responsibility of, I mean, it's essentially you were responsible for how the end of their lives there, right?
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
very.
isn't that, I know what? But when you think about it, if you're the decision maker, that's what you were feeling if you never said the words. But I bet you felt that though.
I did. I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Whew. Okay. I just got goosebumps again. But yeah, and I know you're not the only one who's felt that.
when my parents moved here, still, I must say there were very few books written by caregivers of real life stories. There was books written about caregiving by professionals.
Yeah.
Did not address what the average Jane Doe was going through on a
What
daily.
year about were you
My mom was diagnosed in 2004. Well, my both of them were diagnosed in 2004.
oh yeah.
So
We've
there
come a
wasn't
long way since
a
then.
lot much, nearly even a fraction of what you can find today, which is a good thing. That there are
Hmm.
a lot more out there to help guide.
Yes.
So I'm not trying to rationalize my cluelessness, but I was still clueless even after the diagnosis, pretty much.
Well, I want to is we're heavy on guilt because we're women, number one, and number two, caregivers. It's a common thing, right? We just don't know, and then we feel so like, oh my gosh, it's that responsibility piece, and then we
Yeah.
feel this guilt and shame over not choosing right when you have no experience to go on. And I know at that time, I was a medical provider at the time, and serving families, and I know the resources were slim to none, and
Mhm.
even the resources for medical people were slim, because dementia, it was talked about it, but what we know now, it has come. We have a long way to go, but it has come a long way.
The nonprofit I helped found, allsauthors.com. Part of the reason we started doing this was because we couldn't find it and we wanted to help make it available, make information, stories available for other people. So that was our basis for getting started, was if we can bring these books together for people so that they can know they're not alone.
Yeah,
Mm.
so important.
Right.
I'm okay. I get you get this. Please. I think, yay. I think as authors is just such a gift. It's a gift to the world as people are going through this journey that nobody wants, right?
I never asked for
I
this.
never asked for, not prepared for, and many times are thrust into it. Like they go to bed at night and normal and their normal life, and they wake up the next day and are caregivers, and their whole life has changed.
Mhm.
And maybe even more so now with the lockdowns and the things that are going on with the pandemic, people are saying, I'm going to bring my loved one home,
Yeah.
and everything changes. And
Oh,
there isn't
yeah.
anything that any part of their life that isn't changed. And they love their family and they want to do it, but at the same time you got to recognize it's a lot
Yeah.
to adjust to, and most of us can't even take one part of a change, much less changing
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, so with that said, when I moved my parents here, I thought, oh, mom and I, and my mom, dad, and I are going to be in the same city again for the first time since I was graduated from high school. Really, I moved away to college and career and never looked back. But well, I did look back. I came back and visited.
Never came back to live though, right?
To move there.
Yeah.
So I thought mom and I will get together and bake cookies that aren't flat and black, and we will have a good time. We'll go out to lunch. Dad was in a wheelchair by then. After mom moved him to the respite care, he didn't realize he couldn't walk, fell in the nursing home and broke his hip,
Oh.
which my mom felt guilty that she put him there. So he was in a wheelchair. It's very
Oh.
difficult to get into my house, which has 12 steps coming up to the front walk and a very tight, twisted entry from the back. In any case, I thought at least I can bring my mom to my house. And I had all these visions of doing all these things together, which was not really reality. And
Yeah, maybe a little naive, Vicky. Yeah.
not a fraction.
I don't blame you. I'm like thinking, I would be thinking the same thing.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
going to be so much fun.
yeah, there'd be like rainbows and flower petals, and yeah,
That's kind of,
so great.
yeah. So
Hmm.
it turned out my parents, we thought they were going to be in the same assisted living um, apartment. And when it came down to getting them here, my dad needed too much skilled nursing care, so he had to go in the memory care unit right away. And my
Mm.
mom was put in the apartment, and it was in the farthest corner. You could not get any farther away from where my dad was in memory care, that she had to walk. And she's having trouble with her knees and arthritis, so she ended up
Oh,
in the walker herself at this point. But she would go and spend the day with him every day. And
and
it was just hard.
yeah, and before that, your mother was his full-time caregiver herself, right?
My
Because he
God,
had Parkinson's disease.
yeah,
Yeah,
mom was amazing in retrospect. These things I think of later, like, oh, I wish I could have a conversation with you, mom, to tell you how amazing you are, and things
yeah,
I never said because I was too close to it at the time. But with
yes.
looking back, I can see how brave she was, and hopefully she can hear me wherever she is.
I hope so. I hope so. And for all who look back later, feel the same way. It's just like I didn't see it at the time. Do you think writing it as you were writing, because you kept journals, we talked about this in part when you kept journals, which eventually became your book, your first book. Did that help clarify some of that for you at all? Did I see it in a different light or?
Taking time and
Yeah.
growing older to realize, oh, it's not a piece of cake,
Mhm.
based and
Yeah.
what she faced and bravely dealt with without asking for help. And
Hmm.
I looked at it as stubbornness. Maybe it was just
Yeah.
her way of being who she was,
Right.
which was stubborn. But
Stubborn. Yeah. I wonder too, I think about that and I think I wonder if that's, how mothers who are stubborn and strong and feisty, if you will, raise strong daughters, because you got to be strong and how important it is. I don't know, I've learned it more myself. I kind of feel like life started over for me at 60 and
Mhm.
realized how important it was to have a voice and to stand in my light and with the voice and not let that be silenced. That wasn't clear to me before. And I think growing up with a strong mother, um, that was always in me, you know.
Mhm.
I hadn't,
You
I
just
had
had
it,
to,
I found it later. Yeah.
yeah, it's good we're coming into ourselves, maybe.
Yeah. Some of
But
us are a
that's
little slow.
my fairy tale of moving them here. I thought, well, I'm going to get mom on all these vitamins. This is going to help her brain if I get her on B vitamins and extra calcium because she's osteoporotic, and
Mm.
we'll get her on vitamin C and vitamin E and everything I could think of. Pretty soon, my mom was taking 20 pills a day because she also had prescriptions for arthritis and
Oh,
other health conditions that she had. So just putting her pills together for the week took quite a bit of time. Then I
yeah.
had to trust that she was taking them properly, which was a whole nother matter as as time progressed. But
Right.
again, I think my expectations were so skewed and unrealistic when and it took me a while to kind of simmer down and go, okay, reality is I can take her out once a week. She liked to go to the dollar store. That was kind of our outing. My dad, I couldn't take him really
Yeah.
anywhere. It was too hard. And I felt guilty leaving him in this memory care where it seemed to me he was still a lot more mentally aware than or
Mm.
able to communicate than a lot of people that lived there. So
Yeah.
that was difficult. So my expectations fell heavy because they didn't get to stay together. We didn't get to do the things I thought we'd do. And it's not all about me, I realize, but it took me some time to adjust to this. And my mom continued to decline. My dad, he just seemed to kind of maintain
Uh-huh.
just who he was, but my mom continued to decline to the place. There's, again, so many stories. She would call me with the most outlandish claims. That my dad's baby was visiting him, and I like my dad, a baby. Said yeah, that caregiver person and him have a baby together. That was one of the things she told me. She called me one day and said someone broke into my apartment. I said they did. How do you know? She said, well, they stole my iron.
Hmm.
And she called and say the food here is just horrible. Well, I came to find out that she was taking her food and squishing it up and putting it in her drink, um, in her beverage. So
Oh
of course
my
it
goodness.
wasn't
No,
very good.
it was,
I
that
couldn't
was bad.
I
Yeah.
can't remember doing that. One day she called and said, they're so mean here. They took away your dad's shaver from me. And I said, they did? So I investigated and found out my mom would shave him every day. But
Hmm.
one day she just shaved off his eyebrows, and that upset them. So they tried to take it away, and he took it and threw it against the wall and broke it. So that was the end of the shaver. They shaved.
You just can't make stories like that.
You can't. So I knew things weren't all going well. And when she she told me, and again, it's being able to say, Mom, I'll investigate that when I get out there. I'm sorry that's happening, rather than trying to say, Mom, don't be silly. That couldn't have happened.
Mhm.
I think it's
Yeah.
you choose how you react. And if you can choose to react in their reality, if it's safe to do that, that's what the best thing we could do. I wasn't very good at it, to
I was
tell
going
you.
to ask you, did you know that then? Because that's
No,
a learned, that's
it took me some time. I mean, I
yeah,
came to it, but too
right.
much time passed before it really came to me that if I just let her unwind, if I
Hmm.
just listened to what she had to say, she would eventually I could change the subject. I mean, when she was accusing me of stealing her money to travel and different, I would try to argue and reason and everything. This
Yeah.
was not a good thing to do. And I eventually learned just to let her talk it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of guilt. People have a lot of guilt over those things of not communicating right and not doing things just so. And even in the clinic, I'd say these are learned behaviors. They're not the way you would normally respond to your parent, nor have you ever been in this role to be to be the caregiver or the daughter turned almost parent or son turned parent, and you learn these, and each person is unique too. So what worked for your mom may not have worked for your dad, and being able to juggle like that, and to and it's all, again, it's a matter of love. You're doing whatever you do, you're doing it with love,
I had to come to the conclusion
honor.
I was doing the best I could with the information I had at the time, and
Hmm.
I didn't have enough information. But learning patience is probably the key to a lot less tears and anxiety if you're
Yeah,
practicing patience, which is
right.
hard when they ask you the same thing for the 17th time in a half hour. That's very hard
It
I'm not
is. It's a,
I'm
and
not good.
it's a lot easier to talk about it than it is to go through it in
Yeah,
the moment.
yes,
Bec-
yes.
Yeah, because it's not an isolated event. Like, the only thing that's happening in your life right now is that they're asking you the same question over and over. You are also making dinner. You're talking on the phone. You've got your spouse to. You got all these other things going on at the same time, and the same question every minute or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
So as my mom continued to decline, there was questions whether or not she was taking her medication properly, and I knew I saw it on the writing on the wall that she was short, not going to be in this an assisted living apartment very much longer on her own. That she was going to need the memory care. So
Mhm.
I looked for a different place for them to live. I was looking for something more where the rooms were surrounding a common area and where they all came together rather than living in an apartment where she had to walk a long ways to get down to somewhere to eat. I didn't
Mhm.
think she was ready for the dementia care unit because my mom just, it would have been very hard for her. But she was very angry with me that I was going to move them. She was
She was
very,
angry.
oh, she was so angry. The day of the move, I hid the people that lived there walked her over to the new place. My husband, I packed everything up, and my husband took it in there. And my mom said to him, "When you see your wife again, tell her she need not come visit me here." So,
Now, did she understand it was a memory care? It
well,
was.
it wasn't necessarily a memory care, but it was. Although probably a lot of the people that lived there had dementia, it was. I don't want to say it was long-term care, I guess is what I call it.
Mhm. A higher level of care.
Higher level of care.
Mhm.
Yes, a
More
higher level.
monitoring and things.
Yeah, where they would give the pills out, but they wouldn't be in a lockdown
Mhm.
place with everyone that's demented. They had their own room.
Because it sounds like she was pretty much in like an independent living, like an assisted living
Mhm.
without a lot of supervision and things. So
Exactly.
fairly
No,
independent then.
yes, it was very
Yeah.
independent. She just needed more um, help, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, we're talking about a very strong, capable woman, your mom.
yes. Well,
And
2 days after she told that to my husband, she called and she said, "Well, why haven't you been to see me?" And so, again, but the decline continued. And she, one thing I would really um, propose that people have one central place that where there's a professional who knows all the parts are doing. My mom was taking medication, Aricept, which probably by this time was not doing a darn bit of good. It was 3 or 4 years later, and I don't think it helps that many years. She was on Seroquel, which is an off-label use for sundowning.
mm-hmm.
It was causing a lot of side effects. She would end up in the common area at night, stark naked, swearing like a sailor.
Oh.
She was having hallucinations, insomnia. She couldn't sleep. It was really awful. They ran out of They thought they ran. I was ordering in being a good steward of their money. I was ordering their medications from I rather than getting them locally. It was a lot less expensive to order them in bulk. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
they called and said they'd run out of the sundowning medication, Seroquel, and that they called the doctor, the internist, and he said, well, just leave her off of it. She's coming in next week. I'll get her restarted. I said, you aren't out. I know you're not out. I bought 3 months worth. It's only been a month. They're
Uh-huh.
like, oh, you order their medication. I said, yes, I do. And the next thing that happened was she went into her appointment. The doctor started her back on at full strength, which I've later learned is a really bad idea. Her
Uh-huh.
psychiatrist was the person who had originally prescribed it. So my
Right.
mom was having a lot of what it looked like TIAs. She would just drop on the floor. She was fainting. I mean, maybe they were TIAs, I don't know, but she was having a lot of side effects from starting at full strength again, a lot of hallucinating. So I got a hold of the psychiatrist who was livid. She was so upset that he'd done that starting at full strength again. It was a big, huge mess. Um, I don't think she ever completely recovered from that. And
Uh-huh.
so
Yeah.
if you have one person that knows that what's
Like a
going on,
ringleader. Yes.
the daughter orders the meds, the psychiatrist prescribed the med. I mean, so I don't know. Someone said a gerontologist will coordinate all that for you. I
Right.
didn't have one of those people at
Yeah.
the.
Oh, there's a shortage of those, but yes.
Well, so she's fainted. Yeah, there are. She
Uh-huh.
fainted, and they said they couldn't get her to come back. And so they called me, and I'm like, call an ambulance, call an ambulance. And so they did.
Uh-huh.
And 3 days later, and every test there is, this is how they found out there was vascular dementia involved because they did MRIs and CAT scans and everything you can imagine. $9,000 later of our probably taxpayer dollars for Medicare,
Uh-huh.
uh,
Uh-huh.
he was deemed to have vascular dementia.
Okay,
So
so look, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of how I would respond in that. So your mom fainted, but she didn't come back, so she wasn't conscious then?
yeah, she was unconscious, and they kind of panicked at the
Uh-huh.
facility and called me and asked me what I wanted them to do, and I was like,
Yeah.
call an ambulance. Well, I mean, it was probably the right choice, but sometimes I've wondered if I,
Yeah, I don't, yeah, I mean, in case this helps people out there listening, I was, when families would call and have crisis, or I was placed in the position to, as a provider, to make the decision, my response was typically, um, in a lot of instances, there's no right or wrong or better or worse
Mhm.
because we're all unique and we have no idea that whatever decision you make is the right decision at the time for you. And if we need to alter that decision as time goes along, or we may know better next time, maybe to do something different, or maybe we do the same thing, it just depends. It's okay because you haven't been down that road before.
Yeah, you haven't.
You
That's so
haven't.
true. That's a really,
No.
really good insight.
Yeah, I mean, what if there was something going on like a UTI that it could have treated easily and she
Often
bounced
that
back?
a lot of times it was a UTI because
Mhm.
there's no real pain that they talk about. These
Right.
happen. We many times it ended up being a UTI when she was having all this weird behavior.
Yes.
I mean, to the
Yes.
point where the first thing I'd say is, does she have a UTI? Oh, yeah, we'll check for that.
Mhm.
So
UTI meaning urinary tract infection. It's like a bladder infection. And only in older people, they may not have symptoms of it at all, except for falling or unsteadiness or really wacky behavior that is out of character. It's like, what? And I used to just see people, I'm like, I got a feeling. It was like a feeling I got before it even had gotten to its peak, because by the time people are having symptoms, it's spread big time.
mhm.
So,
Oh
yeah,
my,
I
so
just
true.
had to throw in that little public service announcement.
To throw in. And my mom continued to decline and was falling out of bed a lot. So they put her mattress on the floor. And coming to grips with dementia is fatal. She's not going to improve. There's no point in giving her 20 vitamins a day. She was evaluated on the MMSE, that mini mental
Mhm.
evaluation, and she scored a 4 out of 30. So they determined maybe the ARSEP was pretty soon. We cut her pill taking way, way
Mhm.
down.
Mhm.
Um, And then she just sort of lost interest in eating. And they would coax her to eat, and as much as they could. I mean, they were lovely people that were doing their best to do everything they could to keep my mom alive by
Uh-huh.
whatever means necessary. That I mean, outside of a feeding tube or something. They,
Right.
my mom had filled out a living will, and there's a couple different healthcare proxies that you can fill out. But there were a couple of them that she'd filled out saying no heroic measures, please. That I don't want a feeding tube for one thing. And when it came to the place where she wanted to stop eating, she would refuse food. She would take it and smear it around the floor excuse me, the table, and but they would coax her into a little Ensure, a little, and you know, with this thought in mind, I did. She was on hospice by now. I talked with the hospice nurse one afternoon when I was visiting, and said, wow, "Can you tell me why they're forcing her to eat when she's turning her head away and not wanting to?" And they said, "Well, it's to keep her alive, obviously."
Mm-hmm.
And she said, "Families want their family member to be kept alive mostly any way possible." And I said, "Well, that's not what wasn't my mom's wishes. I
Mm-hmm.
think she made it clear she's not really wanting to eat right now." Um, and the hospice nurse said, "Well, for most people, it's not the quality of the person's life, it's the quantity." And I will have a chat with the caregivers. So she had the chat. I was again probably a week later visiting, and my mom said, "I want something to eat." And the caregiver looked at me and said, "Is it okay if I give her food?" Like, oh my gosh.
Misunderstanding there. Like, don't force her if she doesn't want it versus don't give her anything at all.
Yes. So again, something got lost in the translation, and I talk about feeling about that big that they thought that I was trying to starve my mother. Oh, so we got
Oh,
that.
Vicki. And that's a big thing for hospice, how sometimes people will say don't do hospice because they'll won't they'll stop feeding and they're just like hindering the inevitable, and but it's really the quality and quality of life versus the quantity of life, and not feeding people purposely is not feeding them if they're not um
If they don't want to eat,
if they
fine. If they
don't want to, and or not able to swallow well and not
want,
have no indication that they want to eat. And um,
well, she
oh
said,
my goodness, I can't imagine how that felt.
I felt like a terrible person.
Mhm.
But the nurse had said, it's not it's, when you look at it, who are you keeping this person alive for? Are you keeping them alive for them, or are you keeping them alive for yourself?
Mhm.
And again, quality versus quantity. So,
Yeah.
yeah, 4 months, my mom kind of went back and forth until she was about 70 pounds. It was a rough way to go. They
Seven.
said when you refuse liquid and food, it takes only a couple weeks, but she was eating a tablespoon now and then, just to
Yeah.
really tough death. Um, yeah.
Did it I said, but I'm wondering like how that felt, because some people maybe in that situation would say, if only I could get her to eat something. Um, and
Because
again, it goes back to that question, and that the
of,
guilt too, because as humans, we our instinct is to save another,
mhm.
and death is scary, and it's the end, and again, the instinct is to avoid that as if you
Avoid.
can, you know.
My mom had said to me so many times, I can still hear it in my head, "I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Why can't I die? I'm
Uh-huh.
ready to go." And so, I mean, it was my way of attempting to honor that. When she was, even before she stopped eating, she would say that to me when she was talking more. She
Hmm.
pretty much quit talking towards the end.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, she still recognized me. Sometimes
Yeah.
she didn't know my name, but I knew she knew who I was.
Yeah.
Um,
I am certain there are some people listening who are thinking, what would I do if
mhm.
given? What would I do? And it is um, it's a real reckoning, a moment of reckoning. And I always recommend talk about it before you're in you're in a crisis that, and I'm saying crisis being, but that tipping point where you need to say, okay, don't force it, but have already worked through that ahead of time. Like you had your mom's, the was it living well, and her,
Five
she,
wishes. It was called five.
yeah.
Mhm.
So then you had a good idea, but that's a
Oh,
lot for you to carry on your own.
well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and she made it, she clearly stated what she wanted, but I still felt like the Grim Reaper coming in and saying, don't force feed her. If she wants to eat, fine, but if not, please don't force her to eat. And it's like I was making I was making a choice there to not keep her alive in some ways, and it just was agonizing watching. However, so very very different than my dad.
Yeah. So here we go. Two different people, both with dementia, but completely different end of, well, we haven't talked about your dad yet, but completely different end of life experiences.
Mhm.
Uh,
I'm a lot more peaceful about my dad's passing than my mom's for pretty obvious reasons, I believe. Um, I still think I, I feel like I did the right thing, though, that she had made it clear to me what she wished. And even though it was that unfortunate mix up about not feeding her versus feeding her when she wanted to eat,
yeah. Yeah.
I stand by what my decision, although it took a lot, it was hard.
Yeah, I guess the right decision for you and for your mom doesn't mean that it's easy.
No, and it doesn't mean it's the right decision for everyone.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's an everyday, because it's difficult watching someone you love just basically disappear. They're just getting smaller and smaller and more frail, and that alone is tough, but then when you add you're the one also dictating and saying these are her wishes. And I gotta say, even at that point, I don't know, Vicki, if she was capable of eating anything without a lot of because then things change, the swallowing reflex and the ability. I mean, this is the point where you might have get them to put something in their mouths, but that connection, now I need to swallow, or if it's not really chewing that's needed, but even for salivation to
Yeah.
prepare to swallow, that's gone. They're not able to do that. And it just kind of, and then you get aspirate, things go down the wrong way and go into the lungs, and then it's a whole nother thing, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
ah well, what would you recommend then? You've got someone who is not there yet, and maybe they are still able to talk to their loved one, and what would you say? Or
I would say you need to talk to them. And if they're still able to talk to you and find out, ask questions and find out what their wish is for the end of life. No one should be, forced to be kept alive
yeah.
when it's, I think communication is the key to
Hmm.
this. They need to probably have certain documents in place, but hopefully that's been done prior to.
Right.
And I did not know this is how the end was going to be, so it was hard. Like, how do you plan for it? Cover all your bases? I'm
Yeah,
thinking
it's heartbreaking.
it is heartbreaking. See,
Yeah. And the details of it too, because heroic measures is kind of a vague term.
it is.
And what might be heroic to me may not be heroic to
That's a
you or
very
to,
good point. That it's open to interpretation. I think being specific,
yeah,
please force me to eat if I turn my head away and close my mouth. And I mean, specific, the more specific you can be, and
yeah.
the better.
And usually if you haven't experienced it, you wouldn't know to expect that to happen.
No, it's
And
expect the unexpected. I guess.
yeah, I mean, when when I first started to even write my book and talk to families, and they were telling me how the public doesn't really understand, and I'm in the world of dementia, I was kind of like, really? And was attending business networking meetings, women in business, very intelligent, very bright women, but they didn't really know a lot about dementia or Alzheimer's, and it was still the dementia or Alzheimer's controversy. What's at least it's not dementia, or at least. And I asked them, like, what do you know about dementia? What are like the top three things? And one was that it's only old people who get it, and you're only older, which isn't the case. That when you do get it, it's a very short course.
Really?
Yeah, people get it and they die shortly after, and almost everybody's cared for in a long-term care. Well, those are three very false assumptions in our country for certain.
How long
And,
ago was this?
huh?
How long ago was this?
Um, Maybe 5 years ago. And
Really?
yes, because they weren't, these were people who hadn't had no experience at all, essentially, or maybe they heard about people, but they weren't really closely involved with it, so didn't know. And so if you don't really know and you're not around it,
Sounds like me in the beginning. Right.
yes,
Yeah.
right. I mean, that's where we start because you don't know any different. And what do we see? This is part of why I do what I do, because what did we used to see when we would see dementia? And I'm imagining, like many, because I asked, is sitting in a wheelchair, kind of wrapped up in a blanket by a window, just staring and not, yes, or just sleeping. That was the image of dementia. And we're both working hard to raise awareness and to say this is really what it's like. But if you have that vision of it, and that there's a short, it's not this long course like it is, that it's a short course, then the thought of how am I gonna, what about decisions that need to be made at the end don't really cross your mind,
No, they
because
surely.
nature takes its course, and I'm just going to be there and love them through this transition. And instead, you're there loving them in a way that you never imagined that love would manifest,
Mhm.
because that's a manifestation of love, is to say, don't force her if she doesn't want that.
Exactly. I
Hmm.
thought, ah,
Yeah.
the guilt. Yeah,
Still, do you still feel that?
a little, but I also feel that it was the right choice, as painful as it was. I got to be there when she passed, which was really beautiful.
Yeah.
My dad was sitting there going, "Does she have stomach trouble? Doesn't she feel well?" So he was pretty oblivious.
So
Like,
your mother passed before your father,
yes, a year and a day.
a year and a day.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so we understand about your mother's passing, which to me, that's um, to have experienced those kind of end of life decisions on your own. To me, is just so it's heartbreaking, and then you're still. I mean, I don't know how long it took you to even be able to write about that.
I
Um,
don't remember how long it took, but I'm not sure.
yeah.
I thought the moment of death was amazing. I feel so privileged that I was there. I think it took away some fears from my
Hmm.
own. Just
Yeah.
what happened. It was just so peaceful, and you just felt her. What?
Lift.
Yeah, lift.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
She had a
And,
single tear that rolled out of her eye just before she.
oh,
It was really beautiful.
yeah. And it's a scary thing for most, but anyone who's been there,
Mhm.
it's really an honor to be there. And
This whole
it's
experience.
birth and death,
Mhm.
and to be present. And I've been present in many deaths, and um, it's
You
something.
felt that too, that peaceful, just yeah,
Hmm.
transition.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for some people, they didn't have family to be there. That's why I was I did home visits and things. So I would be there. And this is before even hospice was
Amazing
what
how
it is. Yeah. And so, sitting there and being there, and it was just it's really puts what is the word I'm looking for? It puts everything in perspective. hmm And to be there at the end of a life, and so if that's for your mom, and your dad is in the same community, then the same long-term care community.
he was. And he registered, I think, that my mom was gone, but I'm not sure how long he remembered that. He enjoyed people. He would like to hold hands with whoever. And one of
Um,
the nurses called me to say that he'd gone into everyone's room and collected all their stuffed animals and had like 2 dozen stuffed animals in his lap, and they didn't know how to return which which room. He was just sort of a teddy bear kind of guy.
oh, so kind of go with the flow kind of guy.
Oh, definitely go with the flow.
Yeah.
The day he passed away, the facility called me to tell me that he didn't seem to be feeling well. They wondered what I wanted to do. And I said, well, I'll be right out. I came out and my husband came with me. My husband's a physician, and kind of checked him over, and he seemed pretty good. I mean, he was kind of in and out of sleep, and he talked to me, and he seemed stable. We left to go grab something to eat, and we walked in. The phone was ringing. We walked in our door, and it was the facility saying he's taken another turn. So we hurried back, and we got there, and I held his hand, and he died.
Just like that.
Amazing. Just like that. There were no real warning symptoms. We suspect maybe he just had an aneurysm and massive heart attack, something. And he just went very quickly, very
Wow.
peacefully. He just died. Again, a very beautiful experience. How lucky am I to watch both my
Right.
move on to the next
Right.
step?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So two parents, two different kinds of dementia, but about the same time, different courses, and
Mhm.
two completely different and
Yeah.
deaths.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Well, you've had some experiences then, Vicki.
Yeah.
And
Wonderful.
I'm so glad you could write about it, because there are people right now, sitting at home and thinking, I don't know what to do. I,
Mhm.
I don't I don't know what to do, and feeling like many caregivers are feeling, I'm the only one I know experiencing this, and I don't know who to explain it to, because they probably wouldn't believe it or know what to say.
Mm.
Yeah. I don't know if you hear that much when you speak, but when I speak with caregivers, they or even from my book, they're like, well, I feel like I'm the only one going through this, but I'll tell you what I'm feeling.
Yeah. I know I have heard that too. I usually it's after I've talked about my book, and they'll say, I thought I was the only one going through this, but now I see that I'm not alone. Which
What a
is,
huge gift. I mean, the pain of being isolated, in physical isolation is one thing, but which is bad enough, but the emotional isolation of feeling like you're the only one going through it, and there's no one to talk to that can really understand it. And what a huge gift it is to say, no, you're not.
you're not
Join
alone.
our circle.
If I can come back to Oz authors one more time,
Yes, please
we're
do.
a
Yeah.
safe place for people to come and browse and find what speaks to them. That's what our goal is, that one of our books will speak to you. Or we also have bloggers that we had do a podcast, that there's
Yeah.
something for you.
Yeah, and it's like a hug. Join our circle, join us,
Mhm.
and find authors.
It lifts the burden. It helps the healing process begin. Just
Yes,
to know you're not alone.
absolutely. And one of the beautiful things about being virtual, and for those who are and on social media and things, you can actually find, I mean, that's how we connected, right? I'm
Mhm.
like, you find those authors, and many have there, like on Doggies for Dementia, we have things that are going on. You do too, and all's authors, what's happening, and you can actually dip your toe and look and see, and connect,
You
and
can. I mean, that's how Gina and Marianne, that's how we all met each other, was on social media.
your founders, the group of founders, yeah.
And the people that also are part of our board and the people that do volunteer work for us, we all met online.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and
interesting back and forth conversation. I mean, our Alzheimer's and Dementia Resource Facebook page is a place to meet up with people.
yeah, I'm going to have all that information in the description of the video, so they'll know how to find All's authors. And I totally recommend go take a look and see. And I'm sure you'll find something that speaks to you. You know, a book, a story, and someone. And I've interviewed several guests that are All's authors, and
We're a totally volunteer organization too. So yeah, it's all
yeah,
volunteer.
and these are people who are writing about their experiences and giving guidance then as a result of what they've experienced or telling their stories. And there's just so much to get from that, because when you're like following someone else's footsteps, and while every person is unique, those of us reading the books as well as those with dementia, there are some commonalities there that
There are. I mean, our journeys are the same but different.
yeah, and finding ways to cope. Some of us journal and write. I know when I went through a particularly really difficult time in my life, I created videos of just talking. I was just, it's like a video diary. um,
Yeah.
that I did. Yeah, and because it was so traumatic for me, I knew that when it was over, I really wouldn't remember. I was just getting through moment to moment to moment. And I thought, I'm going to just do this video diary, and so that I have that for myself. And I've never looked at it again. Surprisingly, I remember more than, but I look at it now as an outsider looking in. I haven't quite got to the point even yet. I think it's been 5 years, and I still haven't reviewed that as a participant.
Huh.
Which, yeah, and it's been 5 years, and I mean, it was at a where it really wasn't safe for me to be at home, and I had been staying at various hotels in the area, and I'll drive by and I'll get like that's a trigger for me when I see it for that moment in time, but I have yet to really like viscerally experience it fully. But I think if I watch those videos, that would be a tipping point for me, but I haven't done that yet. I felt
Someday
like,
when the time is right, it will happen.
maybe I don't need to. Maybe living it was enough. I don't know.
It could be true.
Yeah, and it's funny because in one of those days is when I had finished my book and I pressed send to the publisher.
Whoa.
Hmm. That was a moment, and there I was in the midst of this, and like, yeah, but I got my dream. And I remember recording that video that is my dream. And so I think that while we're going through things, and there are stuff we find that helps, and helps to cope. And so I went all around talking about that, but I'm really, really, I really wanted to say I'm so glad you guys are there with All's authors, and we're here with Doggies for Dementia, and there are some wonderful groups out there like ours, other nonprofits and other groups that do wonderful work to support. And that has not been a long-term thing. I think that's just grown like in the last, I want to say like even 3 to 5 years. And
Yeah, things have really, really mushroomed, I think.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think for a lot of us, we write the book we wish we could have read. Um,
true.
mhm.
Yeah. You know what? That I think you're totally right about that. And I remember because I followed 13 families for a couple years and told their story and then would visit again. And they did so much good for me that they never knew, and I didn't say at the time, but they were like a family for me. And some I would be there for holidays, and nobody knew what was happening in my life at the time. And but I was there for them, but they were there for me and never knew it.
Never knew it.
Never
Wow.
knew it. No, and I was writing these beautiful love stories and living the opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
think,
that's good because that gave you hope that what you were experiencing wasn't the only thing out there.
yeah, yeah, hope and to say, yeah, I could have that too. That's okay. And I found it where it was. I found it in other ways and things. And so there are moments of healing and little miracles all over the place that
If we only open our eyes.
absolutely, if we just open our eyes and see and feel, just wait and feel. And what a great closing for us today. And Vicki, I am. This has been a wonderful talk. I've just so enjoyed chatting with you. And um,
For
I
me
know
as
we were staying offline. I can't wait to meet you in person.
yes, yes. I think it will happen.
I think
But
so
we'll
too.
have our needs, right?
Yeah. We're taking doggies on the road. We're taking a doggy field trip. I know as soon as things are safe again, the doggies for dementia is going to hit the road because um, we're going to be training photographers in other places in the country to do what
Oh,
I do. Yes. So that we can serve more families and continue to raise awareness in even a bigger way. So I'm getting all that in place and looking to start training. So if you know of someone who maybe just loves the camera but doesn't know anything about it, that's okay. Because we're starting from scratch to teach people how to photograph and how to about dementia so they can be comfortable with families. Mhm. So
that is a super good idea.
yes, I can't wait to meet you and others out there. Just just look at what's there and hold on. Yeah, hold on. You're not alone.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Carmen. It was really
See you all next week. Take care. Bye bye. All right. Let me turn off the recording. That
we
was
talked.
great.
Did we talk for an hour? I mean,
Probably. See,
we've been going for 2 hours now.